Why saxophone players need a 1-year learning commitment? If you are a saxophone player, especially an adult learning saxophone, and you feel tired of starting with motivation but losing consistency after a few months, this video is specifically about learning saxophone as an adult and about why saxophone improvisation feels exciting at first but often becomes unstable, confusing, or emotionally heavy over time. Many adult saxophone players believe they lack discipline or talent, but the real problem is not the player. It is the way saxophone learning is structured for adults. In this video, I want to introduce a concept that's completely changed how adults grow with music. The idea of a 1-year learning commitment, not a 1-year course, not a 1-year challenge, a 1-year commitment designed to help adult saxophone players start improvising and actually stay with music long enough for real transformation to happen. Why adult saxophone player keep starting over? Most saxophone players don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they keep restarting. They take lessons, they practice scales, they watch videos about saxophone improvisation for a few weeks. Everything feels alive. Then progress becomes less obvious. Improvisation feels fragile. Life gets busy. And slowly the saxophone goes back into the case. Months later, the cycle starts again. This cycle is emotionally expensive for adult sax players because adults don't just practice music, they attack meaning to it. They think, I should be better by now. I have tried this before. Maybe improvisation is not for me. This internal dialogue is not technical, it is psychological, and no amount of scale will solve a psychological problem. Why most saxophone learning systems fail adults? Most saxophone learning systems were designed for children. Even when they are sold to adults, children learn through authority. Adults learn through understanding and safety. Children accept repetition because they are building identity. Adults question repetition because identity already exists. So when adult saxophone learners are placed inside child-based system, something breaks. Music becomes school, improvisation becomes a test, mistakes become a proof of failure, and the creativity disappears. This is why saxophone improvisation is often the most stressful part for adult learners. Improvisation demands trust, but the system demands control. This contradiction creates anxiety, and anxious musicians do not improvise freely. The hidden cost of fragmented sax learning. Today, adult saxophone players have access to endless information, tutorials, courses, books, videos, and yet confusion is higher than ever. Why? Because fragmented saxophone learning creates noise instead of clarity. Adults jump from one scale to another, one teacher to another. Everything makes sense individually. Nothing integrates. This creates mental fatigue. Adults feel like they are always practicing but never arriving. Eventually, they stop trusting the process, not because they don't love saxophone, but because they feel lost. Why adult saxophone learners need a container? Adults don't need more motivation. They need a container. A container is a structure that holds you when motivation drops. A 1-year learning commitment creates rhythm, weekly contact with music, clear orientation, not constant decision making. Instead of asking, what should I practice on saxophone? The instructor answer, this. This removes mental overload. And when overload disappears, consistency becomes possible. The difference between access and integration. Short courses can give access. They can help adult sax player touch improvisation. But access is not integration. Integration requires time. Improvisation on saxophone is not a switch you turn on. It is a relationship that needs repetition without fear. When adult learners touch improvisation but don't integrate it, it disappears. Not because it was fake, but because it was not protected. This is why a 1-year learning commitment matters so much. It protects what begins. The 8-week threshold. When I talk about starting improvisation in 8 weeks, this does not mean mastery. It means crossing a threshold, a moment where the adult sax player realizes, I can create something. This removes fear. It removes the myth that improvisation is only for gifted people. But crossing a threshold is not the end. It is the beginning. The 1-year commitment exists to stabilize what starts there. If you recognize yourself in this experience, there is nothing wrong with you. Nothing. You were never inconsistent. You were just in a system that didn't protect you from quitting. In the next part, we will look deeper at why adult saxophone players quit and why staying is the real breakthrough. Why adult saxophone players quit? The real reason. Adult saxophone players rarely quit suddenly. They don't wake up one day and decide to abandon music. Quitting happens quietly. Practice becomes shorter, then irregular, then optional, and eventually absent. This process is often misunderstood. People say, you lost motivation, but motivation is not the root cause. Adult saxophone learners quit because something breaks internally. Adult learners quit because something breaks internally. The connection between effort and meaning. Adults can work very hard when effort feels meaningful. They cannot sustain effort when it feels random, confusing, or disconnected from results. This is especially true for saxophone improvisation. Improvisation exposes vulnerability. And when adult sax players try to improvise and feel lost repeatedly, they don't just feel confused, they feel exposed. And when exposure is repeated without guidance, the nervous system chooses safety. Safety often looks like stopping, not because they don't love saxophone, but because they need to protect themselves. Many adult saxophone players believe they need more discipline. They promise themselves, I will practice every day. They push harder. They blame themselves when they fail. But willpower is not designed for long-term creative learning. Willpower works for short bursts. Music requires continuity. Adult sax players already use willpower at work, in family life, in responsibilities. When learning saxophone also demands constant willpower, fatigue is inevitable. This is why intense short-term motivation always collapses. What adults need is rhythm, not force. A 1-year learning commitment creates rhythm, weekly structure, clear orientation, reduced decision making. Instead of asking every week, should I practice saxophone? The instructor answers, this is the next step. This frees mental energy. And when mental energy is freed, consistency becomes natural. Why most saxophone learning paths collapse at 3 months? There is a predictable point where most adult saxophone learners quit, around month 2 or 3. The excitement of novelty fades. Progress becomes subtle. Improvisation still feels unstable. This is the most dangerous phase of learning saxophone as an adult, because the changes happening are internal. Listening improves before playing. Awareness grows before confidence. Adults misinterpret this phase as stagnation. They think I'm not improving, but in reality, they are reorganizing. A good learning environment anticipates this phase. It normalizes it. It says, this belongs here. This single message prevents quitting. Without it, adult sax players leave, not because they failed, but because they misunderstood what growth looks like. Why staying feels scary for adult sax players? For many adults, staying feels risk. They ask, what if I waste time? What if I commit and nothing changes? This fear comes from experience, from past attempts that didn't last, from promise that felt empty. But the real risk was never staying. The real risk was restarting again and again. Every restart resets progress. Every restart reinforces depth. Depth cannot form without time, and the saxophone improvisation requires depth. Staying does not mean blind loyalty. It means choosing a container that respects adult reality. A one-year learning commitment is not a prison. It is protection. Protection for quitting before real integration happens. What changes when adult sax players stay? When adult saxophone learners stay, something subtle shifts. They stop negotiating with themselves. They stop asking whether they should practice. Music becomes part of the week's rhythm, like eating, like walking, like thinking. This is not loss of passion. It is stabilization of passion. Improvisation stops feeling like a test. It becomes exploration. Mistakes stop feeling dangerous. They become information. This is where learning accelerates, because the nervous system is no longer defending itself. How confidence returns quietly. Confidence does not return through hype. It returns through evidence. Small, repeated moments where adult sax players realize, I can recover. Recovery builds confidence faster than success. Knowing you can continue after a mistake is more important than playing perfectly. This is why adult saxophone learners who stay long enough stop fearing improvisation. They trust themselves to navigate uncertainty, and improvisation is uncertainty by nature. Why this matter for saxophone improvisation? Saxophone improvisation cannot survive in an environment of fear. It requires safety, safety to explore, safety to fail, safety to sound unfinished. A one-year learning commitment creates its safety through continuity. Improvisation becomes part of identity, not a performance. And identity is far more stable than motivation. If you recognize yourself in this pattern, there is nothing wrong with you. You didn't lack discipline. You lacked a structure designed for adults. In the next part, we will explore what happens after adult stay, how identity shifts, how motivation transforms, and how saxophone learning becomes sustainable for life. When adult saxophone players finally stop quitting, something important changes. Not immediately, not dramatically, quietly. The instrument stops feeling fragile, not easy, but familiar. Adult saxophone learners stop asking, can I do this? They start asking, how do I want to do this? This question marks a deep shift because it means the learner is no longer fighting for permission to exist in music. They already belong. This is what staying does. It moves the adult saxophone player from survival to orientation. Motivation is often misunderstood. Adults think motivation must be strong and constant, but motivation is fragile when it depends on emotion. In fragmented saxophone learning, motivation rises and falls with results. In a one-year learning commitment, motivation transforms. It becomes rhythm. Adult saxophone learners no longer rely on feeling inspired. They rely on continuity. Music becomes something they return to, not something they chase. This is why staying feels lighter over time, not heavier, because effort is no longer wasted on restarting. The quiet identity shift in adult sax players. Identity does not change through declaration, it changes through language. Adult saxophone learners start saying things like, I was playing yesterday and I noticed something. I hear harmony differently. I am curious about this sound. They stop saying, I am trying to learn saxophone. Music moves from go to space. This is crucial because when music becomes space, it stops competing with life. It integrates. Why confidence returns without force? Confidence does not return because someone says you are good. It returns because the adult sax player experiences recovery. They get lost and find the way back. They make mistakes and continue. They improvise poorly and survive. This builds trust. Trust is the foundation of saxophone improvisation. Confidence born from recovery is stable, not dependent on success. This is why adult sax players who stay long enough stop fearing improvisation. They trust themselves inside uncertainty. How improvisation becomes part of identity. At a certain point, improvisation stops being a skill. It becomes a language. Adult saxophone learners no longer ask if they can improvise. They simply improvise. Not always well, not always confidently, but honestly. This honesty is what makes improvisation musical, not perfection. This is the result of staying. Why adult saxophone players stop comparing themselves? Comparison is common among adult learners, especially in fragmented environments. Who is better? Who progresses faster? Who understands more? In a stable learning journey, comparison fades because progress becomes personal. Adult saxophone players compare themselves to their past life, not to others. This creates calm confidence, and calm confidence supports creativity. How music stops competing with adult life. Many adult sax players compete with life, work, family, responsibilities, but in 1 year commitment, music integrates. It becomes a place of restoration, not obligation. Adults stop feeling guilty for not practicing enough. They practice consistently without force. This is sustainability. The difference between learning and living music. At this stage, adult saxophone learners stop learning music and start living music. Music becomes part of thinking, part of feeling, part of listening. This is why progress accelerates without pressure, because learning is no longer isolated. It permeates life. Why adult sax players rarely quit after this point? Once music becomes identity, quitting feels unnatural, not dramatic, just unnecessary. Adult sax players may slow down, may pause, but they don't abandon music, because it feels like abandoning a part of themselves. This is the power of staying long enough. If you recognize yourself in this transformation, there is one final piece to explore: the decision to stay. Not as discipline, but as alignment. In the final part, we will bring everything together and look at why staying is the real breakthrough and how this choice quietly changed everything for adult saxophone players. The most important moment is not the beginning. Most adult saxophone players believe the most important moment is the beginning. Starting lessons, buying a new saxophone, deciding to finally learn improvisation. Beginnings feel powerful. They feel full of responsibility. But for adult saxophone learners, the most important moment is not the beginning. It is the moment they decide to stay. Stay when progress is slow. Stay when improvisation feels unclear. Stay when doubt appears. This moment is rarely celebrated, but it is where real transformation begins. Why adult sax players keep searching? Many adult saxophone players spend years searching for the right teacher, the right method, the right explanation, the right shortcut. This search is understandable. It comes from hope, but it is also comes from fear. Fear of committing and being disappointed again. Fear of staying too long in the wrong place. So adult learners move, they restart, they reset. And without realizing it, they prevent depth from forming. Because depth requires continuity, and continuity requires trust. Why staying feels dangerous? For adult saxophone learners, staying can feel risky. What if this doesn't work? What if I waste time? What if I commit and still don't become the saxophone player I want to be? These fears are not irrational. They are informed by experience. But the real danger was never staying. The real danger was never allowing learning to mature. Saxophone improvisation is not fragile because it's difficult. It's fragile because it's abandoned too early. Staying long enough allows improvisation to stabilize, to integrate, to become part of identity. How continuity changed time for adult sax player? One of the strangest change in a 1-year learning commitment is how time feels. At the beginning, adult saxophone learners count weeks. They measure progress constantly. They worry about speed. Over the time, this urgency fades. Music stops feeling like a race. It becomes a space to return to. Time becomes an ally, not an enemy. This shift reduces anxiety dramatically. And anxiety is one of the biggest enemies of saxophone improvisation. When saxophone improvisation feels like home, at some point, often unexpectedly, adult saxophone players experience a quiet moment. They pick up the instrument and feel at home. Not impressive, but familiar, safe, alive. This moment is not the result of technique alone. This is the result of relationship. A relationship built through repetition, trust, and staying. This is when music stops feeling external and it feels internal. The real transformation, not what people expect. Many adult saxophone learners expect transformation to sound like progress. More notes, more speed, more complexity. But the real transformation feels different, calmer, more present, more honest. Adult sax players stop trying to prove something. They start expressing something. Improvisation becomes conversation, not performance. This shift changes everything because expression is sustainable. Performance pressure is not. Why this journey protects adult saxophone players? A 1-year commitment does something very important. It protects adult saxophone learners from themselves, from self-judgment, from impatience, from unrealistic expectations. It creates a container where fluctuation is normal, where doubt is allowed, where imperfection is part of the process. This protection is what allows growth to continue when motivation drops. And motivation always drops. This is human. The quiet decision that changed everything. At the heart of all, this is a quiet decision. Not to rush, not to chase shortcuts, not to restart again, but to stay long enough for music to unfold naturally, to allow yourself to be a learner again, to allow sound to mature. This decision does not feel heroic, but it is, because in a culture obsessed with speed, staying is radical. What does this mean for you as an adult sax player? If you are listening and recognizing yourself in this journey, there is no pressure to act, no urgency, no promise to make, just an invitation to reflect. Not on how fast you want to improve, but on how you want music to exist in your life. As pressure or as presence, as a test or as a companion. If you are an adult saxophone player who feels tired of starting again, this is not a failure, it's a signal that you need a different relationship with learning saxophone, especially with saxophone improvisation. Improvisation is not about talent, it's about staying long enough to trust yourself. And when that trust forms, music changes. If you would like to continue reflecting on this journey, I wrote a free ebook about my own path as saxophone player and musician. You can download it at marcelocuco.com/ebook, or in the description of this video you can find the link. No obligation, just something to walk alongside you as you decide what staying means for you. Thank you for listening.